So command history is one of the benefits of the bash shell. In the bash shell, something that it kind of does behind the scenes is it records every single command that you type into a history file. This file is usually stored in your home directory, and it starts with a dot, so you can't normally see it unless you use the TAC-A option with ls. But the .bash_history file records a very large list of previous commands that you've typed. And in combination with this list of history that you've typed inside of your shell, there's also a bunch of different commands that you can use to leverage that history to your benefit, to make typing things and different commands that you've used previously a lot quicker, or being able to look at a command that you typed in the past. Maybe it was a really long command that took you a while to construct and look at the options and the man pages, and you don't want to go through all that again. So you can quickly look in your history to figure out exactly what that command was. So let's look at some of the ways that we can use the bash history to our advantage. So the command history, there's a couple different environmental variables that are used for the bash history. We're not going to cover all of them, but a couple of them that are useful is going to be hist file. So if we echo $hist file, we can see that it records all of our history to the .bash_history file inside of our home directory. And as I said a minute ago, if we do an ls, we can't really see it, but if we do an ls TAC-A, there we can see all the files that start with dot, in particular the bash_history file. And if we take a look at this file, we can see that it has all of the previous commands that we've used in the past, and we can go through and look at all of them. Another variable that is used is called the hist file size. That is set to 1000 on this system, and that is basically set to tell the shell how many commands, how many previous commands that we've executed do we want to save in our bash history. A lot of systems, this is going to default to 500, but you can increase it to whatever you want if you want to. Now, if we just type the history command, what we're going to see is basically a whole list of commands in our bash history that it's going to print to the screen, and each one of the commands is going to be associated with a number. The one with the largest number is the most recent command that we executed, which right before this we typed the history command in order to see this output, so that's why history is at the very bottom. Now something that's worth pointing out here is that this output is different than if we were to look at the very end of the .bash_history file. You'll notice that history was not the last command. In fact, it was this exit command right here. So all of these commands are not actually in the history file yet. And that is because when you start or open a shell or a session on your computer and you start typing commands, it actually saves all of your bash history in memory. So it's running in memory, and the memory will not actually be dumped and written to disk to the .bash_history file until you exit the shell or log out. So if you watch, currently those commands aren't in my .bash_history file. We can see the last command in there was exit. So it ended with sudo rm and then bin sudo rm and then exit. So if I exit the shell and then open another one, now if we do a tail of .bash_history, we can see that our most recent commands are actually in the file. So when you exit the terminal or exit the shell, that is when it is actually dumped from memory into the file. So we talked about the history command, which will allow us to see all of our history. And then something else we can do is just, for instance, history 5. That'll just show us the last 5 commands that are in our history. If we want to execute the last command that we executed again, we can just say bang bang. It's a quick way to just keep executing the previous command. If we wanted to execute, let's say we wanted to execute this command, the 1003rd command, we can say bang 1003. And that actually executes the clear command for us. Let's say we wanted to execute the second command from the bottom. We can say just bang -2. And that would subtract 2 commands from the last one. Something else we can do that I find useful is, for instance, say you just SSH to another system. We'll just use the local host and SSH into our own system here just as an example. Okay, well, we have a host key issue here, so we'll talk about exactly why this occurs later. But for now, I'm just going to fix this issue by deleting these entries from our known host file and SSH. So I just SSH'd in. So say we were doing some work on this system, and then we exited from our SSH session, and then we were resuming some work on our local machine, and then later we wanted to SSH back into that system. Well, we can just say bang SSH. And what it does is bang, and then any amount of letters after it will automatically execute the last command that started with those letters. That SSH connection was the last thing that we typed that started with SSH, so it just executed that command again for us. And you can use this with any command, not just SSH. But it's worth noting because it does become fairly useful, especially if you're typing extremely long commands that wrap around multiple different lines that you don't want to type all the way over again. Another nifty thing about the shell is Control-R. If we type Control-R, what it does is it's a reverse history search. So what we can do is we can type, for instance, SSH, and it will automatically complete the last command that it found that started with SSH. If we type, for instance, sudo, it finds the last command that had the string sudo in it. Now, if that's not the one we wanted and there was another command that we had ran that had sudo in it, what we would do is just keep pressing Control-R here. And it's just going to keep going back in history, one at a time, to find each and every command that had the word sudo in it. And when we find the one that we want, we then can just hit Tab, and it will automatically put that command on the command line for you. So that is probably my favorite quick way to find commands that we executed in the past within our history file, to be able to quickly find them and execute them. And this pretty much covers most of the shortcuts and things that you need to understand in order to leverage the bash history to your advantage.